Motivational speaker Jim Rohn famously said that we are the average of the 5 people with whom we spend the most time. And that's a pretty cool statement, because if it's true, it means we are ultimately empowered to decide who we're going to be and how good we're going to be, or how smart or how strong or how morally upright, by choosing the people with whom we spend time, the people that we keep in our circle, that we allow the most information about who we are and with whom we share our intimate thoughts and desires, and they share in return back with us. That's pretty cool. It's very empowering. My guest today on the show is definitely one of my top 5. And here's how you know. Here's how I know. Because the simple way, if you look at my speed dial, it's a person who is in the top 3 on my speed dial. Additionally, I don't think over the last 20 years with this person, the conversation has ever ended. It's always been a continuation of a long-running conversation with many. If you ever went to a comedy show, how you know a comedian will tell a part of a story, and then they'll go on to tell other parts. And then one part from a previous part of the story will come back and be a recurring theme throughout the story. There's many of those. The conversation runs for decades now, to the point where I often feel like this person is one of my business partners, because they know the ins and outs of my business. As well, I am their business partner because I know very much the ins and outs of their business. And I'd like to say that that's a super important thing, to have someone with whom you don't have to pull punches, who has your best interest in mind and your best business interest in mind as well, with whom you can share your even off-color remarks and, hey, maybe I should do this, and they'll call you on it. Or, maybe I can do that. What are your thoughts on this? And not worry about judgment. The good thing about that is, aside from the obvious benefits, is when it comes to doing a podcast, per se, something like this, this particular friend of mine has probably done 5 of the top 10 podcasts in the last month. Yet I have no worries when he called me and said, let's do your show. I had no apprehension. I had no hesitation. My only stipulation was, I'll only do it if you agree to keep it 100. I don't want you coming in doing the polished sales lines. I'm going to do everything I can to keep you from going on autopilot for what the things that you've said on the other 10 podcasts. And I'm going to tell the truth, and I want you to tell the truth. And if you're cool with that, then let's just get on the phone. I mean, we don't even have to, aside from press the record button, we don't have to really worry about what's coming next. Everything that comes next is going to be a result of what we've been talking about for the last 20 years. And we're going to relate it to your current project, which is your first publisher house published book. It's his second book. The first one was self-published. This one, he got a nice advance to do by a major publishing house. As a matter of fact, there was a bidding process for which publisher was going to get his book as a result of his hard work, consistency, and innovation in his own space. So this morning, I got on the phone with my good friend Light Watkins, meditation teacher, and recent second-time author. The conversation we had is going to span from his early life through his book, but I think we keep it pretty entertaining, and I think you're going to learn a lot about meditation, the value of it. You're going to learn a lot about the person himself. There's a lot of laughter, just from shared stories. The super fantastic show. I like to talk about parenting. I like to talk about relationships. So that's all in there. And I think you're really going to enjoy it. Take a look and make sure to pick up a copy of the book, Bliss More by Light Watkins. The super fantastic show. Keep it 100. Answer my question. Who's Forrest Watkins?
Oh, we started?
Yeah.
Forrest Watkins is the name on a fake ID that I had when I was in college, when I first got to college.
Tell that story.
Where I met you.
Tell that story. You get off the plane.
So I was, you got to take it back. So over the summer before college, I had a job at a bank that my dad set up. And they had this graphics program called Harvard Graphics. It was the first time I'd ever played with a computer graphics program.
Old school.
And of course, you know, as an 18-year-old, I'm thinking, well, what can I do with this skill set? And I'm about to go off to college. You know, I have this entrepreneurial mindset. Mm-hmm. I've had that my whole life. And there was an attempt at one point when I was 17 to try to make a fake ID, and I got busted, and it was very embarrassing. I was on a date with a girlfriend of mine. I gave the waitress my fake ID when I ordered a daiquiri, and she said, "I can't give this back to you." And I looked at my date and I said, "I think we should leave right now. I think we should stay here for dinner." Meanwhile, I was like, "What is she gonna do? She's gonna call the cops." It's like she just didn't give it back to me. So the waitress was probably only 18. Yeah, it was laminated. It was in my wallet. You know, you have the wallets with the little clear window joint.
Right.
So I showed her my ID through the wallet. She said, I need to actually hold it?" And I gave it to her, and she looked at it, and then she looked at it, and then she like zoomed in, like, "What the?" And she said, "I'll be right back." And then I was like, you know, as a 17-year-old, you don't know what's about to happen. So I started panicking. I told my date, I said, I think we may have to go. And then she came back and said, "I can't give you the ID back. I'm sorry."
Right.
Which is very awkward. So anyway, I had been honing and refining my fake ID skills. It didn't deter me. It just taught me I needed to do a better job the next time. And my dad was taking me to college. So he and I were going to college. I had a manila folder with all my fake ID stuff, like all the because I was not only gonna do it for myself, I was gonna mass produce this. That's just my plan.
It's gonna be able to make money in college.
Yeah, I'm gonna make money in college. I'm gonna mass produce fake IDs, and so I had all the different components. They were all gonna be these Alabama driver's licenses.
Right.
All I needed was a photograph, like a passport photo or something like that, and then we could go somewhere and find it, get it laminated. This is back before they had barcodes and stuff like that.
Barcodes, right? You're the guy who, in all the movies, that the criminal goes to get the passport to get out of the country before they pull the heist.
That's right. I'm that guy. That's right. Exactly. So when I got to college, first of all, I screwed up the dates, right? So I told my dad had done any research. He was just going on what I told him. So I said, okay, check-in is on, let's say it's on Monday.
Right.
Right. So we showed up in DC on Sunday. He was going to drop me off at my dorm room on Monday, and then he was going to go off to some business trip. Mm-hmm. Right. We coming up from Alabama. We show up Monday morning, first thing, bright and early at Drew Hall. Nobody's there. So then right off the bat, I'm thinking, all right, I didn't double check the date. I didn't triple check the date.
Right.
I hope I got the date right. There are chains on the doors. So then we're like going around. My dad is pissed. And because, you know, I didn't double check the date.
Right.
And we're trying to see if there's any way we can get in because he's got to go out of town the next day. So there's no way we can get in, of course. He's got to cancel his trip. So now he's really pissed. I remember he said to me, "I wish I could just knock your head through that glass window. We're sitting in a car." He said, "I feel like just knocking you through that window right now." And as an adult now, I totally get it. Mm-hmm. You know, as a kid, I was like, well, I think that's a little harsh, but yeah, I was a little embarrassed. So anyway, so he was already pissed off. Okay. My dad's an attorney.
Right.
Right. So his whole life is by the book, you know, don't cut any corners. You can always increase the lag time, but eventually you're going to get caught. That was his whole message to us growing up. Mm-hmm. So the next morning we show up and now everybody's there trying to check in. And the one thing you need to check in are your health records, right? I had no idea where my health records were. In fact, I didn't even know if I had my health records with me because, again, I was very unorganized. All my whole preparation was make sure I had my fake ID stuff and my clothes and everything else.
Right.
But I did remember collecting like my birth certificate and some other health stuff and putting it in a manila folder. So I told my dad, it's somewhere in my stuff. It's in a manila folder. So we're like scouring through all my stuff in the lobby of the dorm. People are like walking around us to check in.
Right.
And I'm looking for health records that they're requesting. My dad pulls out the manila folder with all of my fake ID stuff in it. My dad, the lawyer, pulls out the manila folder with all the fake ID stuff in it. He goes, here it is. He's all excited, right? I found it. And he starts looking through it. And I could see his face. It's like that waitress who looked at my ID and then looked at it real closely. He did the same thing. He looked at it and then he got really serious and looked at it closely. And he goes, what the hell? And then he took it. He took it away from me.
So that's who Forrest Watkins was. Forrest Watkins was the ID, the
Forrest
name on
Watkins
the ID.
Was the name on the ID, yeah.
Right.
And it's funny how that. And he, to his credit, he didn't really make after that, he didn't make that big of a deal. He was pissed, but I guess he figured he probably did some knucklehead stuff too when he was a kid. But that's how I started my college career.
Right.
My first rejection. My first sabotage.
So while we're on college, I know that you had a choice to make in where you go to school. And from what I recall from us talking about it, the choice was either going to be Morehouse or Howard. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Does that have some significance in your family? I mean, where did those two choices come from?
Well, for those people who aren't familiar, Morehouse and Howard are both, top historically Black college and university schools, HBCUs. And my first introduction to HBCUs was actually when I was 16, and I met a buddy by the name of Kirk Hatcher, who became one of my mentors. And he was a Morehouse graduate. So I started doing more research. Martin Luther King went to Morehouse, and all these really prominent figures in the African-American community were graduates of Morehouse. And so I just had it in my heart that I was going to go to Morehouse. And plus, Morehouse was only a couple hours away from where I was from. But that didn't really that was, if anything, that was probably the con, because I wanted to get far away from Alabama, where I grew up.
Right.
There's something inside of me that always wanted to experience the big city. And at the time, Atlanta was a big city compared to Montgomery, Alabama. Mm-hmm. So once I opened that door, and then I started asking, well, wait a minute, hold on, what else is around? And then I discovered other universities, Hampton University, Howard University, etc. But the big thing was my brother chose to go to Morehouse. Now, my older brother is 11 months older than I am. Mm-hmm. And I'd been under his shadow my whole life. So, I didn't want to spend another 4 years being known as Donald's brother, or Donald's younger brother. I wanted to kind of blaze my own path. And I think that's one of the things that if you're not the oldest sibling, you're like right under the oldest sibling. There's a little bit of, it's funny, I was talking to my therapist about this yesterday, about how there was a little bit of competitiveness, because she was asking me, I have two younger brothers, and she was asking me, did I feel like I wasn't getting enough attention from when my younger brothers came on the scene? And I said, no, actually that was the case at all, because the next gap between me and my next brother is 3 years. So, and when you're a kid, 3 years is like, you may as well be, your cousin or somebody.
Right.
But my older brother, who's only 11 months older, we shared the same birth. We were the same age for 1 month out of the year.
Yeah.
So, and he would always be, clued in onto the next fad. He had a Kangol before me. He was hip to Run DMC before I was. He always knew what the next hot song was or the next hot fashion trend was
before you.
And I always wanted to be the one to say, no, you're not onto this yet. And I never, so I kind of wanted to always be a leader and blaze my own path in our dynamic, we have a lot of love for each other. So it wasn't like we were, backstabbing each other or anything like that. It's just, you just wanted to have your own, you wanted to be known for who you were, not because you were someone else's brother. So
Right.
when he decided to go to Morehouse, that kind of killed the Morehouse thing for me. And then I thought, well, let me just figure out where I want to go next. And my dad took me up to Howard University, and I remember going there and just knowing that that was exactly where I was meant to be.
Okay.
And I love DC. DC was a much bigger city than Atlanta, and so for me, that was right up my alley of what I wanted. It checked all the boxes. Big city, HBCU. I knew I wanted to go to an HBCU, and beautiful women and the whole bit. It's funny because one of the most beautiful girls growing up, she was a sister of a church friend of mine. She was probably 3 years older than we were, or maybe 4 years. And so again, that was like an eternity. So she was like a grown woman in my eyes.
Right.
But I remember her being very attractive, and she went to Howard. So that was one of my inspirations, because of course, why do anything if a beautiful woman is not attached to
catch up
decisions?
with her at Howard?
No, she was gone by the time we got there.
Okay. So you grew up in Montgomery, Alabama. And I want to ask what it was like, but through my lens, because there's a picture that you have of you sitting on the couch next to Rosa Parks in your living room or wherever that was. And to me, when I saw that picture, I was like, first of all, look, there's my friend looking ridiculous at like 6 years old, but he's sitting next to this civil rights icon and he's not tripping. Right. So what was it like in that house? I mean, you said that wasn't even like a stretch. That was just a thing. What was it like?
You know what, man? Honestly, that day, you know how when you go around your parents and they introduce you to people and you're like, oh, who's this old lady or who's this old man, and you just see them as an old person, you don't see them as a historical figure or someone who has a lot of wisdom or anything like that you would do when you get older. So for me, in that picture you're referring to, I was probably 12 or 13 years old. Man, I was probably thinking about how I could have been home playing video games or something like that. I wasn't tripping on the fact that this was the woman who had basically initiated the modern day civil rights movement.
Right.
And of course, I wish I had it to do over again. I would be completely, immersed in that whole experience if I could go back as myself now and talk to someone like Rosa Parks, because she was our age when all that happened.
Right.
And
so why was she there?
She was a friend. She's a family friend. Apparently, she's a friend of my grandparents, and that was at my grandmother's house. And she was. That Montgomery is a small town, and especially back in the '60s, it was a very small town. And my family was there, and she was there, and my grandfather was the president of the university at the time.
Which university?
Alabama State University.
Okay.
Alabama State University, which was like the big college in the town. And, so there was, everything was integrated, and they went to Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, where King was the preacher. Mm-hmm. And that was the church. That was sort of like the base camp for all the different strategy meetings for the bus boycott. And, or at least one of them. So I didn't know exactly what the relationship was, but I knew that, I was introduced to this woman, Rosa Parks. You hear about her. We lived on Rosa Parks Avenue growing up.
Okay.
So there was that point of reference, but even still, it just didn't sink in like it would sink in if you're an older person.
Right. Yeah. No, I get it. So your grandfather's the president of Alabama State. Your dad's an attorney in town. I'm trying to just set a basis for who your family is and where and who they became. And so I want you to also talk about your uncle, who was the surgeon, and who he was in Baltimore.
Well, my dad's whole family, who's my dad's father was the president of the Alabama State, and his wife, she raised all 6 kids, and they were all educators and doctors, and my dad's a lawyer. And so there are 2 brothers. Two of my dad's brothers were doctors. One was a heart surgeon at Johns Hopkins. His name is Light Watkins. And he was one of the people, or the guy, who discovered or or developed or the defibrillator, which was a pretty big deal.
Yep.
And, you know, he served on the board of Johns Hopkins for a very long time, and he just passed a couple of years ago. And his other brother is a doctor as well, more of a general practitioner in Charlotte, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And then his sisters were educators, and his one other sister was a doctor of math. And so, yeah, very educated family, very supportive and of each other, and, you know, very close knit, tight knit family.
Right. So there's that model, that old, even immigrant model sometimes, or maybe not even just immigrants, but an old family model, which is if you're going to put the kid through college, they're going to go be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer in some families. And it mm-hmm. seems like to some extent your family followed those recommendations, maybe through that particular generation.
Very traditional career paths. Mm-hmm. Like my cousins have all been like just working in business, but I think it extends beyond just my family. I think you could say most African American families have that kind of mindset, you know, that you need to, in order to become quote unquote successful, you need to have a more traditional career path, or you know, you want to be at least making a lot of money, or you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to have some sense of control and things like that. I think that's something that most of us have, or at least that generation of the baby boomer generation of parents we're experiencing.
Right. So how did that translate into expectations for you? I mean, here you are, we're talking 25 years later, off on your own. You're a meditation teacher in Los Angeles. Yeah. You're all the way West Coast. You know, your career, your chosen career at this time is not in that traditional footprint. How does Alabama see you now? How does the Montgomery family see you, and you know, as you've made your progression?
What's interesting is my dad told us several times, whatever you do, don't become a lawyer. Mm-hmm. He always said you want to work for yourself. My grandmother, his mother, used to always say the cream rises to the top. So if you're really good at what you do, you don't have to worry about how crowded the field is. You're going to rise to the top. So you just have to. So I had that in my mind. It's just, you have to work really, really hard, and you don't have to worry about trying to out-compete anyone. You just keep working hard, be the best at what you're doing, and you'll rise to the top. And for me, that meant you'll get everything you need, you know? And to their credit, my parents' credit, they never talked about profession or what you should do, or they never even really talked about going to college all that much. They never said, don't go to college. The only thing they said don't do is they discouraged us from playing sports. That's the only thing they told us not to do. And
wait, even as a kid, or are you talking about like going off to professional sports? Even as a kid, they were like, don't play basketball, don't play football?
Don't play football, don't play basketball. And the reason was because they didn't want us to get hurt.
Even like
baseball. My dad had this whole thing. My dad, you know, so my dad, he's from that era. He's from the civil rights era. So his whole thing was, look, you know, these guys who are playing all these professional sports, they're entertainers. They're entertaining people. He says, you want to be the guy owning the sports team. You want to be the guy cutting the check. You don't want to be the guy playing on the field, entertaining everybody else. That's his mindset, right? I don't necessarily agree with that. Even now, as an adult, I think sports can teach a kid very valuable lessons, especially team sports.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, their whole deal with football ended up being, you know, they didn't want us to get paralyzed or get, you know, brain damage and all that. So that ended up being fortuitous, their whole idea around that. But, right. You know, like you said, baseball, there are sports where you can play and the chances of you getting terminally, you know, ill from that are going to be very minimal.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the only thing they told us not to do. But other than that, you know, we could pretty much do whatever we wanted to do. They exposed us to art classes. They exposed us to summer programs, whatever we pretty much wanted to do, they would do. They tried to get us into doing some music stuff. But, you know, back then, all you wanted to do was go outside and play. And then that was also when video games, Atari and all that stuff first came out. So you played a lot of video games. I would do a lot of artistic things on my own and build things on my own. And create like movie like props in the backyard, like Pitfall. Remember the video game Pitfall?
You guys
We put up crates.
did pitfall pits and swinging ropes.
Yeah, dude, exactly. You did that, right?
Of course.
Exactly. I mean, you could spend a whole afternoon just setting up the Pitfall amusement park in your backyard,
and then see who can do it fastest or whatever. That's funny.
Yeah, and then somebody get hurt really bad.
Yeah.
And or you jump ramps on your Huffy bike.
Absolutely.
Setting up a plank of wood.
Land the wrong way and bust your lip.
Yeah, or without taking the nails out of the plank of wood first.
Right.
I remember my friends on a nail. It's like, it's all kinds of, that's what you would do during the days. And they would just, facilitate all that. And so when we eventually went to college, my dad did say he wanted us to go to an HBCU. He saw the value in being surrounded by other African Americans who were, also getting educated and exposed to like diverse environments. And because I think he realized that there's a networking potential there that he didn't enjoy when he graduated from Southern Illinois University. And that people who go to a Howard or a Morehouse or Hampton or FAMU, you end up being able to network with these guys for the rest of your life. So that's kind of how they were with our career aspirations. They were very open and supportive.
It's funny, all this time I didn't realize that you didn't play any sports. I played every sport, coming up. And it was the way to do something because school lets out like it does now. My kids get out of school, they're home by 2:30. My parents worked until 5 and, sometimes later if they, if the day ran long or whatever. So it was the way to come out of class and then have something to do structured. I played every sport. Any sport I can get I can get on the team. If I can make the team, I'm on it. So
yeah, no, I was very uncoordinated, awkward, gawky. I was the last. So it's funny because, at the beginning of the year, I'd be the first guy picked on the basketball team because I'd always be the tallest guy.
I still wouldn't pick you first.
And then after the first couple of games, I'd be the last. I'd go all the way from the first guy to the last guy picked. Even like the girls, everybody would be picked before me because I was embarrassingly uncoordinated.
Right.
And some of my most embarrassing moments in primary and secondary education was on the field, trying to catch a ball or trying to kick something. I'm 6'3.5" now. So back then I was like 5'11" or something like that.
Right.
As a kid.
Are you still playing? Because I know you played this year on the. Was it volleyball or soccer? Or you did both?
We did volleyball. We did volleyball and soccer. Yeah,
right.
This is adult league volleyball and soccer.
How was that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very athletic now. Like since I've been training since after college. So one of the best things about going to college is I didn't have to take any more physical education classes. You had to do like I think I did Tai Chi in college. I did bowling and I did tennis. And what's funny is bowling was probably the hardest one of all. Meaning I was almost going to get a C because I didn't realize that every time you went up to bowl you were being graded. So
that's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
If you score badly, you've been graded poorly.
Yeah.
Not even just the effort.
So you had to.
How many pins did you get?
No,
that's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. It came down to how many pins you. So I was taking a class. I thought I was, easy A. You go in there and bowl a couple hours.
Yeah.
But yeah. So physical education was just not it wasn't my thing. I wasn't into it at all. But my parents also didn't really. My mom would walk. My dad didn't really do much physically, other than just he would always brag about how he walked upstairs and stuff like that when he went to work. But there was no real role model in my family for working out or being physical at all. Right. And so again, my dad was more singularly focused around making money, becoming an entrepreneur, working hard, and that kind of thing. And again, I think there's value to that. But I also with kids now that I have contact with, I'm always talking about, more of an integrative approach to just experiencing all of it.
Yeah. So years later, I'm jumping around a bit because I really, there's what I'm doing is chasing stories that I know that you'll tell really well that I haven't heard probably in years. So years later, you become a yoga instructor, and I've skipped past probably a decade. But I want you to tell the story when you were a yoga instructor and you were given correction on a yoga student, and her boyfriend was looking from the window, and he was getting all triggered because you were adjusting her shoulders or whatever.
Yeah. So I became a yoga teacher when I was 29 in Los Angeles.
What gym was it? Crunch? Where was it?
I was teaching at Crunch Gym. Yeah, it's one of the first places I taught, and I was actually pretty good at it. And so my classes would be fairly crowded. And, this is LA. This is West Hollywood, so you get all these really attractive people in the yoga classes. So it wasn't unusual to have like really attractive men and women in the class. And this particular day, there was this very attractive woman in the class. And, look, I'm a yoga teacher, but I'm still a guy. So I'm obviously, I noticed her. I noticed that, oh, that's a very attractive woman. And, as a yoga teacher, you give adjustments sometimes. And meaning you help people go deeper in a pose, or you just kind of give people an assist in some way to kind of help open up a certain part of their body. Nothing inappropriate. But you do, it's not unusual for a yoga teacher to come and like put their hands on the shoulders or put their hands on someone's back just to kind of help get the person to lengthen their back or something like that. You wouldn't put your hands on someone's butt or, some close up in someone's inner thigh or anything like that. But that's just something that happens in yoga classes if you've never been to a yoga class before. But at the end of the yoga class, it's really common for a yoga teacher to go around and just, while people are lying on their back in what they call corpse pose, where you just have your eyes closed. You just literally, it's like you're just lying flat. Your palms are facing up, your feet are out to the side. And the yoga teacher will go around during this time, and it probably will last maybe 10 minutes. And they'll just go around and just gently press down onto the person's shoulders. So just imagine you're kind of standing over someone, your feet are on either side of that person, and you're just bending over and pressing your hands onto their shoulders.
Right.
So, and when you're in the pose, it actually feels really good when someone is pressing down on your shoulders, because it's kind of opening up your heart region, your chest, and giving you that kind of release. So as a teacher, you're going down the line of students, because they're in a line. There's maybe like 2 rows or 3 rows, depending on how many people are in the class. And you're going down one person pressing down the shoulders, and then you're going down the next person pressing down the shoulders, like that. And so you're just you're like cakewalking around, so you're not making a lot of noise. Right. And you're just very, very gently pressing down these shoulders. So you can see them, but they have their eyes closed, so they can't see you. Now, meanwhile, I'm doing this at this particular class, and there's a glass wall. So everyone who's in the gym is outside of the class working out, but anyone can see into the room everything that's happening.
Right.
And I get to this particularly beautiful woman, and I'm pressing down on her shoulders. And as I'm pressing down on her shoulders, I'm just kind of looking. I'm either looking at her or looking away. I don't know where I'm looking, because again, I'm just there with my eyes open, obviously, so I don't step on anybody. And then I hear this guy banging on the glass.
Everybody's in savasana, chilling.
Everyone's in corpse pose, chilling. I've got this like peaceful spa music playing.
The lights are turned low.
And the lights are off. And then I hear this banging on the glass, and I turn and look, and it's this guy who's like saying something. You can't hear him through the glass and the music, but he's basically mouthing. He's very pissed off, and he's mouthing for me to. He's pointing to the girl, pointing to me, and basically making it known that he's going to kick my ass or something like that if I don't stop touching the girl. So I'm like trying to calm him down using kind of, sign language and miming to him like everything is okay. Right. This is common. He doesn't get it. He's probably never been in a yoga class in his entire life. He was kind of, you could tell he was like a bit rough around the edges, this guy.
Yeah.
Obviously, and easily triggered. And so now the tension is up more in the room. And I didn't know if anybody noticed. I don't know how you could not have noticed that someone was banging on the window, but everyone just stayed in the pose, and I kept going, and I went to the next person and the next person like that. And now I'm spending the rest of the 5 minutes of the class trying to figure out, okay, am I going to get into a fight now? Is that how this is going to end? Or like, what's about to happen? Do I need to apologize? Like, what do I need to do? Because obviously I don't want to get into a fight with some guy at the end of my yoga class in the middle of Crunch Gym,
Right.
who's like a hothead or whatever, it's got a weight in his hand or something like that. And then part of me thought, well, he can't be that serious. I mean, this can't be.
Did he stick around?
So anyway, so people started filing out when the class ended, and everyone played it cool, like no one. But there was one guy who kind of hung around, and he was a regular guy in my class, and I wasn't sure what he knew or didn't know, but he was close to the window. And the guy comes up to me and tells me that if we were in the streets in Brooklyn or whatever he's from, he would kick my ass on sight and blah, blah, blah. And I should be touching people's girlfriends. And I was just it was like me trying to explain physics to a moose, you know. He wasn't interested in anything I had to say about why I was doing what I was doing.
Right.
And but the guy that stuck around, he came to me and said, "Look, I saw what was happening. I was hanging out just in case, you know, you needed to back up or whatever." That was really cool to see that the guy had my back, and
right.
and the situation de-escalated. I never saw them again. So that was probably the most intense yoga experience I had in the 6 years of me teaching yoga.
That's funny. So this guy is what we call triggered. It's a common phrase that we'll talk about every once in a while, which leads us to meditation. If that guy was in your class or he was a meditator, how would we expect his life to change? I mean, what let's talk about it, the value of meditation, and what was that guy on that maybe you could have helped him with?
Well, what I learned later through my studies with meditation was that we as humans, when we react to things, our body stores up memories, and those memories, if they're associated with a distressful reaction, which is what he was displaying that morning, that would be known as a stress trigger, a stress memory, right?
Somebody touched his girlfriend and that just triggered this memory.
Yeah, no. Well, yeah, exactly. Because really the initial trigger was probably received when he was a child, you know, and maybe someone was abusing his mother, or someone was, you know, abandoning him in some way. And that obviously put him in a state of distress or anxiety. And so the body will store that, what that emotion felt like, and it will relate it to a certain visual or a certain scenario or a certain taste or sound or, you know, sensation. Mm-hmm. So if the trigger stays in the body, which triggers can do, triggers can stay in the body for the duration of body life. And then 10 years later or 20 years later, you're around a certain situation that reminds your body of what happened to it when you were 8 years old, then you get triggered. And what that means is the part of your brain that gives you the ability to say, look, that's just a yoga class. You know, they do that in all the yoga classes. It's not a big deal. And even if it is the guy that's being a little bit creepy, she's my girlfriend, and, you know, she's not going to let anything inappropriate happen to her. That part of the brain shuts down and gets rerouted to your reptilian brain, your amygdala, which is basically your fear center. And this is what makes us more animalistic in nature. And it gives us basically two options. We can run away or we can fight. He chose to fight. So him banging on the window was the expression of the fight reaction and the fight or flight response. Mm-hmm. And what that does when you allow that trigger to take over your whole system is it hardwires the connection between the situation and the emotion, the distressful emotions, which means the next time somebody may just look at the girl and he gets triggered. And then the next time he may just imagine that someone is doing something with his girl and he gets triggered. And so it continues to snowball. We call it the snowball effect. Continues to snowball into just becoming triggered really for no reason at all. And I think we all know people like this who are just very easily incited into anger or, you know, sadness or what have you, depression. And it's not because they don't want to see the bright side or see the big picture. It's because their body usually has accumulated so much stress or been exposed to so much trauma that it takes over. They become the Terminator. It just takes them over and they can't even help it. And so what meditation does is meditation basically creates a release valve for this stress, this accumulated stress triggers, so that the body now has a way of getting rid of this stuff. Because that's what the body does when it meditates, is it literally rehabilitates itself in real time. And the way you know it's working is because then you'll be in a same situation that would have triggered you before, but it doesn't have the same effect. You may not even notice that you didn't react in the same way that you would have reacted in the past.
Right. So he could be at the next yoga class a year later and not trip.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
He's not tripping.
You said in your book, in the new book, Bliss More, the movement, Bliss More, that when you first went to learn yoga, you sat in this class where the lady was playing like some electro music that was made by a surfer guy who, was now held up as the hero, but he committed suicide, and you weren't allowed to lean back in the chair. And you said you sat in it and you thought half sarcastically and half optimistically because you wanted it to work. And now, 20 years later, you have people come sit in your space and they listen to your intro talk. And you have to recognize that in some of those people, they probably have those same feelings. Can you see it when you're sitting there, that some people are sarcastic and others are maybe have, super optimistic? What do you see? What do you see from your seat?
I think the differences in those two experiences, so what you're describing was one of my first experiences with formal meditation instruction. And I don't think, looking back on it now, I don't think the facilitator did a great job of managing our expectations. And you see this a lot in meditation circles where when the meditation guide or facilitator doesn't really fully understand what the experience is or what it entails, or they themselves are having to kind of buy into this sort of leap of faith understanding of, you just do it and it'll just, whatever's supposed to work will work, but they don't really know how it works or why it works. Then they can't really properly manage an expectation. So they end up defaulting to kind of overselling the experience. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, you've read about nirvana, you've read about these concepts like samadhi, in the different New Age spiritual books. And bliss is a word that's is very commonly associated with meditation. So I had these expectations of having an experience of bliss or, nirvana. And I remember just not being able to feel anything and feeling like there was something wrong with me, because you also have people who pretend like they feel things that they don't actually feel. And I'm not saying that that's what the people in the room that I was in was doing, but no one could really describe or explain what their experience was in a way that felt genuine and authentic to me. And also, I'm a natural skeptic. I think you probably are too. So I kind of need evidence. I can't just go on faith around something that is so nebulous and so ambiguous in practice. But that didn't stop me from continuing to expose myself to it. And so later on, when I met my teacher about 4 years later, and I finally had someone in front of me who could explain to me what was going on in a way that was accessible and just made a lot of real world sense, that's where I really accelerated my meditation practice. And I started doing it like clockwork. And I started feeling the tangible thing that I'd been looking for in those first few years. Mm-hmm. And that completely changed my relationship. So then he taught me how to do that. And so what I was going to say before is the difference is, and what I do and what that earlier facilitator did for me is I have a much better way of managing expectations. And again, being a lifelong skeptic, I already know what people are thinking when they come in the door. So I like to put people at ease. And, people to their credit, people who come to see me, for the most part, like I've never had anyone heckle me during one of my talks. I've never had anyone blurt out anything overtly sarcastic during one of my talks. Because I think it's pretty clear when I start talking who's the authority on meditation in the room and who's not. And so most people have been very respectful, but some people, you can tell with their body language, oh, this person is probably a little bit closed off to what I'm saying, or what I'm saying is challenging their beliefs in some way that they probably are either going to have to convince themselves of something that doesn't make a lot of sense in order to hold on to those old beliefs, or they're going to have to buy into this kind of new way that makes more sense to their personal experience, their direct personal experience. And so not everybody is going to take the leap into the training with me, but without exception, the people who do are always grateful that they did. And that's a part of, and that is built in as a part of the experience. Like, you're supposed to feel a little bit like, oh my God, this is a lot. This is a lot of money. This is a lot of time investment. I don't really know this person. I just met him an hour ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And so that level of uncertainty is what makes the payoff even greater when they do it. And they're like, oh my God, this is exactly what I needed. I didn't even know that I needed this. I didn't even have language for what was missing, but now everything becomes clear. And I already know they're going to have that experience. So for me, it's somewhat frustrating when you get the pushback, because you know that they're going to just love what you're going to show them. And it's also kind of fun knowing that, being in on the secret that, yeah, this is going to blow your mind.
Right.
And I'm actually going to deliver on everything that I'm saying, and your whole life is about to change, but you don't even realize it. And you're sitting in your chair in your head thinking, I can't afford to spend whatever $500 to change my life, to start sleeping better at night, and all the different legendary benefits of meditation.
Right.
So I think it's a good filter, because it's such an analog experience that, in order for me to do what I do in the best way possible, and I take my job very seriously, and I really do treat everybody like they're Barack Obama sitting in my home studio learning how to meditate. Like, I pull out all the stops and take my time and get, just make sure everybody understands everything before we finish the training. And so I can't do that with 1,000 people a week. I can only do that with maybe a dozen people at a time. So it's kind of a self-selecting process. The people who are feeling called to do it, they do it. The people who don't. And it all just kind of works out in the end. And that's one of the reasons why I ended up writing the book, Bliss More, is because, I think at a lower level of investment of time or resources or whatever, you should still be able to at least understand the principles by which people are actually having the experience in meditation. And I wanted to disseminate those principles as widely as possible, so the people who haven't heard of me, or the people who can't afford to come and sit in on my classes, even though they may want to, can still have access to this knowledge and still have profound experiences in meditation. So that was the intention behind that.
You bring up the idea that part of the experience is that people will say, oh, this is a lot, either a lot of time out of my schedule, or a lot to commit to, or a lot of money to take the course and spend this time, with you to learn. And how do you, you must get some shit. How do you equate, when you hear from people on the outskirts that say, oh, that guy is teaching something that should be free, or how do you justify the business portion of what you do, given that the teaching is something that people will say, oh, it should be God-given and innate or whatever?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you're right. I probably do get more shit behind my back than I do to my face. Mm-hmm. People aren't really as quick to say anything like that to my face, but you hear people mumbling and stuff, and, oh, this should be less expensive. But what's funny about that is we look at, I mean, it's, there's nothing free. There's no free anything in in existence. Everything has a cost. It doesn't necessarily have to be a monetary cost, but could be a time cost, could be an attention cost.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do, and the way that I structure the whole thing, I basically have people come to a free, like, sort of intro session, I call it, which is an orientation. And really it's a way for them to meet me and to kind of see how I embody what I'm teaching. And it's also an opportunity for me to meet them and determine whether or not I want to be tied into this person indefinitely, because once I agree to teach someone, I'm agreeing to become their teacher for the rest of their life. So it's not just a weekend long proposition. It's a lifetime commitment for me as a teacher. And I want to make sure that I'm with people who are sincere, who are authentic, who really want to, who are committed to following the instructions, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And so the next step in the process is I have people make a contribution for their instruction. And it's a sliding scale contribution that they determine for themselves on the honor system, right? And it starts at, I think, $500 if you're a student, or if you're unemployed, it's $700, and it goes all the way up to $1,500. And so it's a one-time contribution. And what that does is it pays for your personal instruction with me over the course of 4 days or so. And then it also advance funds a lifetime of unlimited follow-up and support, which means you can come back to any of my trainings over the course of your life and you can retake them for no cost. And you can also reach out to me and ask me questions, as much as you need to keep your meditation practice self-sufficient. And that's also at no cost. And when people go through this training, because they've invested on their own accord, they came up with that amount. I didn't tell them you should do $900 or you should do $1,100. I say base it off of your income. If you are earning, $200,000 a year, you should be at the top of the scale. If you're earning, $90,000 a year, then you're going to be somewhere in the middle. But you have to, in good faith and in your highest integrity, you have to determine your amount. And I find that most people are pretty honest. And if you don't want to be honest, they just usually don't take the training. So it's a self-selected amount. And what that does is it invests them into really paying attention in the training, mm-hmm. and to really giving it the shot that I think meditation deserves beyond the training, because there are going to be periods of time where either they're going to change as a result of the meditation, or the meditation is going to change as a result of them continuing to practice and refine it. The schedule may change. Somebody may come to town. They may go on a road trip. They may get sick. They may get pregnant. They may get divorced. They may have a child rebelling. And all of these different life changes can derail a meditation practice. And because they invested in it on the front end, usually it's enough for them to say, you know what, even though it's not convenient for me to do right now, I'm still going to sit down and do my meditation. And because they are that committed, then they end up doing it consistently enough to get the benefits from it. And then they start to see, oh, wow, look, I'm actually sleeping better at night. Right. And then eventually, oh, wow, look, I'm sleeping like a baby at night. And then they start to see, because they're sleeping better, they're more rested, they have more energy, they're making better choices in their daytime life. They're seeing more connections between things. They're able to do more things at the same time without getting distracted. Mm-hmm. So it's not about becoming, this kind of soft-spoken, gullible, turn the other cheek, cartoonish version of Gandhi. It's about becoming the best version of you. And that's what the meditation does, but it doesn't happen overnight. And so I need people to be invested in it in the beginning in order for them to get to the point where they're coasting and they achieve what I call liftoff, where they're not having to really think about it much, to plan it much. It's just happening. Their bodies have become dependent on the chemicals that get released during the meditation. And it's just a practice they actually wake up in the morning very much looking forward to. It's just like when that show Breaking Bad was out, I would wake up on Sunday mornings and I would schedule my whole day around watching Breaking Bad. And I know a lot of people do this with their shows that they watch. And it's no exaggeration that I feel the same way about my meditation practice. Even to this day, I feel the same way about my meditation practice. If you don't make that kind of investment in the front end, I haven't seen very positive results with people sticking to it. And so then you have to question, um, you have to. So then the alternative in that situation is, okay, well, I tried out this one thing. I read a book or whatever, and I spent some time doing it. I wasn't sure if I was doing it right. So there's a cost to that, right? You're wasting your time. Then I tried this other thing, this other YouTube video, and I tried that for a couple of weeks and I wasn't sure if I was doing it right. So all that uncertainty is actually, there's a cost to that uncertainty. You're spending time, precious time doing something, and you're not even sure if you're doing it right.
Right.
There's a cost to that. And then someone else may say, well, no, I go to the 10-day silent retreat and that's that's free. Okay, let's look at it. You're taking 10 days out of your life, off your job, away from your family, away from your obligations and responsibilities. So that's free, right? No, that's not free. No. There's a cost to that. How much do you get paid in a week? How much do you get paid in 10 days of having to work? So there's that cost. And then they get you there for 10 days. You can't talk. Okay. There's a cost to that. Not being able to talk for 10 days, right? It's not a monetary cost. It's a will cost. You're having to use your will to not speak. You can't look at anybody. You're only eating one vegetarian meal a day and some tea. So there's a cost to that. And what they're doing is they're setting the conditions for you to have an experience in the middle of the forest, right? And then at the end, after they've given you lodging, they've given you your vegetarian meal, they've given you the instruction for the meditation for 12 hours a day, then they say, okay, the way we run this center is, we run off donations. If you want to donate, great. If you don't want to donate, don't worry about it. Now, of course, what are you going to feel at the end of that? I got to donate something. Right. Yeah, exactly. I can't be a freeloader because it's already embedded in us that if we get something, we have to give something.
Right. You don't want to be a welsher. You've been given something of value already. Yeah.
Right. But if you're a first timer and you didn't see that coming, then you may think, oh, well, that's a bait and switch situation. I thought this was free. And so, it's up to you. But again, we're talking about your integrity. And if you leave without donating something, then that gnaws at you. Yeah. And if it doesn't gnaw at you, then that means I'm a sociopath, and that's a cost to that.
Yeah.
Right. I'm a bad person. There's a cost to that. So what I like about this system that I do is you get to determine your own cost at the very front end. No one is going to determine that for you at any point in time in the back end where you have to feel bad about it and all of that. And that's what usually happens with these other things is people end up getting the cost determined for them later on. And it usually ends with them having a bitter taste in their mouth, where, on that 10-day silent retreat thing, the going home program is an hour in the morning and an hour at night. Now, you have a family, you got a dog, you got a wife, you got 2 kids. Do you have an extra 2 hours in your day to meditate? Exactly. So even if you wanted to meditate, if you're a regular person, and you're not in the forest anymore, and you're not, you can't tell your wife, look, we're just going to be silent and don't look at me and just make sure I have my food, my one meal a day.
Make sure it's here. Slide it under the door.
Can you imagine?
No.
You get smacked in the face. So you have to be able to integrate that kind of thing. And that's what happens is like if you learn in the forest, it's really hard to come back and integrate it. And I'm not discounting the technique, but I am saying that I know a lot of people who've had that experience and very, very few of them actually continue on meditating in the way that they were trained for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. And so the way that I teach people how to meditate is I teach you while you're already in your regular environment, and I teach you how to do it for 15, 20 minutes in the morning when you wake up. Mm-hmm. When you're lying there gathering your thoughts anyway, you may as well be sitting there meditating, just sliding up to your headboard and meditating, and you can get a better quality of rest in those 20 minutes. And then at some point in the afternoon or evening. Now, what's already happening in the afternoon, whether you're meditating or not? You're getting a little energy slump, right?
Yeah.
And that's where people start going for this. Yeah. And what do they start going for?
Sugar.
The donut, the Twinkie, I need another coffee, So I call that dirty energy. You need energy, but there's a cost to it. There's a downside. There's a side effect where you get a sugar crash or you get a headache later or you get the coffee jitters, or you gain weight because you couldn't stop eating the carbs. And meditation, if you stop and go to your car or go to your closet or just close your office door and you sit down for another 15, 20 minutes, you will come out feeling like you just slept for another 10 hours, because that's how restful the meditation is that I teach.
Right.
And so that gives you clean energy. You do that, and there's no the only side effect is you're happier, you're more focused, and you feel like taking on the whole world. So you have a really strong finish to your day. Or if you're going to the gym, you have a better workout. Or if you're going home, you're able to communicate better with your spouse because you're not feeling exhausted, mentally tired from whatever happened during that day. And it's kind of like a little internal reset button that we can press at any time. And it ends up becoming the most powerful thing that regular people can experience on a daily basis.
So meditation is part of what we'll call a wellness lifestyle. And you kind of live in the cradle of wellness communication out in Santa Monica, Malibu, not Malibu, Santa Monica, Venice area. Mm-hmm. What else would you include in that wellness lifestyle? If you were to write a prescription for like a wellness lifestyle, what other facets would you include in there with meditation?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because, a lot of times, again, with a lot of meditation facilitators and guides, they'll paint meditation out to be this panacea for everything. Right. Everything that's wrong with you comes back to, well, you just have to meditate. And I think that's kind of ridiculous. I think meditation is kind of like Jiffy Lube, the oil change.
Right.
Yeah, you got to get your oil changed, right? You can't get around, if you want your car to perform optimally, you can't get around the oil change.
Right.
If you don't get the oil change and the carburetor falls out or whatever, and you roll up in Jiffy Lube, you get the tow truck to bring it to Jiffy Lube, they're going to look at you crazy. Like, what do you want us to do?
Right.
We can't fix this. You're going to have to spend the $8,000 to get it fixed over at Jimmy's Body Shop.
Right.
So meditation is preventative when it's used properly. It's not emergency medicine. It's not a crisis tool for overcoming, some big trauma. And I think one of the mistakes people make is they wait until, we have a mutual friend who is a newscaster, and, she had an experience recently. We were all in college together, and this is 20 something years later. Mm-hmm. We had an experience where she put something on social media saying that she had developed a stutter. Now, she's a newscaster.
That's her job.
Who out of the blue developed a stutter. So obviously that's problematic. And she went to the doctor, and they didn't have any, this is all her words, right? So I'm not speculating here. She told us on Facebook, she went to the doctor. They didn't have any answers for the stutter, but they suspected that it was happening as a result of stress. And when she said that, it made sense. It resonated with my understanding of how stress works, because that's exactly what happens when we build up so much stress. It debilitates our ability to function naturally, optimally, and the regular things that we took for granted, such as our digestive system, our reproduction system, our immune system, even, can go offline if we have too much stress and not enough of a way to release the stress. And so she did another video saying that she had started doing stillness meditation practices and things like that, and that her situation was getting better. And it's not unusual for me to see people come into the door with all kinds of really interesting ailments that the doctors have no explanations for. They start meditating, and they end up experiencing remission and other things that they never even thought could be cured from just sitting down and meditating. But it's pretty remarkable what I've seen in regular people. And even if it doesn't feel like anything big is happening, we don't know what's being prevented. Like there's a friend who we both know, I won't mention her name, but she had a thing where she would drink all this soda every day. Mm-hmm. She would drink like 10 cans of soda a day. And if you just look at her on the surface, she's like this beautiful, healthy, radiant looking person. And so she was kind of obviously a little embarrassed about this, because, it doesn't sound good when you tell people in the wellness community, hey, I'm drinking 10 cans of soda and I can't really help it.
Right.
So she started meditating, And then about a month and a half later, she said, "Look, I stopped drinking the soda. I just stopped. I don't even desire it anymore." And she told me that. I said, do you find it coincidental that you started meditating and you stopped drinking soda? And she's like, no, 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 that's not what it was. I said, well, look, the only thing you've done differently is you've been meditating, and now you just have no desire for this thing you've been doing for years and years. Mm-hmm. And then she finally thought about it, and she goes, yeah, maybe. But, from my perspective, having worked with people for over 10 years, I see that all the time. It's not unusual at all. So when it comes to, overall wellness, I think meditation is one of those key habits, meaning it will put you in a position where you may decide, I don't want to be in this abusive relationship anymore, or I don't want to be in this dead-end job anymore, or I don't want to keep consuming these carbohydrate-rich foods anymore, and then everything starts to domino from there. You start to get on a better diet program. You start to seek out better relationships. You start to look for better employment opportunities, and all these other things that also have an effect on your health, which is really, stemming from your perception, your mind, your emotions. I mean, that's bigger than anything you can eat or drink. And that was one of the things that I experienced as a vegan. I was vegan for 12 years, as you know. Mm-hmm. And I remember, this is back before they had all these vegan restaurants everywhere. So when I started traveling a lot for work, it was very challenging to find clean, healthy vegan food in airports and, in these other cities that weren't LA and New York. I remember going to Alabama. We would go to Cracker Barrel for dinner, and I would order the garden salad, and then I'd have to say, "Oh, can I have it without the ham, without the ranch dressing, without the croutons, without the bacon bits?" And my family would start rolling their eyes and start apologizing to the waiter, because I was this like LA, kid telling them, making all these modifications, but I just wanted a salad without all this crap in it.
Yeah.
And so now that the world is kind of caught up to that diet, I'm not a vegan anymore. But, I think diet is important. Diet is important, but it's not as important as getting frustrated or if you're stressed out all the time because they don't have your food, then your body's not able to metabolize the nutrients from the raw vegan organic food you're ordering anyway. So you may as well be eating McDonald's in that case. So I think stress is the main thing to kind of mitigate. If you can get rid of the stress, everything else will work better. And so that definitely needs to be a part of the wellness package, the meditation. And I'm not talking about weekly, I do it every week with my group at church or whatever. You have to do it every day. It's just like working out. You can't work out for 20 minutes once a week and call yourself a person who's physically active.
Right.
That's just not how it works. You have to do something regularly in order for the body to respond to it, because what people don't realize is that when you start off in a practice like meditation, that's a new habit, but you're also at the same time, you're breaking the old habit of not meditating. And it's just like what you talked about with exercise. When you're coming off the couch, the reason why coming off the couch and going into the gym is hard is because your body has developed the habit of sitting on the couch. So those muscles have atrophied, and that's habitual. That's from habitual sedentary lifestyle behavior. And so opening that up and breaking that down, it causes obviously some withdrawal symptoms from the sedentary lifestyle, which is what people usually experience as soreness in their muscles. Mm-hmm. And with meditation, the biggest misconception with meditation is when people come off the couch, or I should say, come out of, come off the treadmill, the hamster wheel of life, and sit on the couch to meditate. They complain about their monkey mind. They call it the monkey mind because the mind is so erratic. And what the monkey mind is to meditation what sore muscles are to the person coming off the couch, going to the gym, working out for the first time in a long time.
Okay.
It's the withdrawal symptoms of the mind that has not experienced that meditation in years, and for some people decades. And so it's not a symptom of the meditation is not working, it's actually a symptom of the opposite. The meditation is working. It's breaking down the old interneuronal connections. You may find yourself even thinking about old scenarios, like the guy who was banging on the window at the yoga class. Like, he may sit down and meditate. In his first few meditations, he may be thinking about that thing that happened that traumatized him when he was 8 years old, where his mom was being abused or whatever. That may come up in the meditation, and he may interpret that as, oh, it's not working. I'm just sitting here thinking about this crazy thing, not realizing that when his body is releasing the stress triggers, it causes his mind to have these old memories, and maybe even start racing and obsessing on some old conversation related to that emotion that's being neutralized in his body. Mm-hmm. And you don't realize it until later on, again, when you're in a similar situation and you're not triggered. And that's your indication that the meditation is working.
Got it. So we've got meditation, which is shedding stress, recovery. You mentioned food, eating things that are going to nourish your cells. What else is in that wellness lifestyle?
Well, I think you have to work out. You have to exercise. You got to move the body. You have to you have to express gratitude for what you have, because otherwise, if you don't express gratitude, it's a very slippery slope into the comparison mindset, especially with social media these days. You get on social media and you start thinking everybody else has it all figured out. Everyone else is 10 steps ahead of me, and 10 times more attractive than I am, and 10 times smarter and 10 times more spiritual, and all of these things. So what meditation does is it allows you to have a more fulfilling relationship with your true self, your essence, your spirit, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And when that gets boosted and solidified, then naturally you start to compare yourself less and less to other people. And it allows you to not only not compare yourself, but to appreciate the differences, and then ultimately to be grateful for the differences and for the diversity of life, and to even reach out and congratulate people sincerely when they're doing well in life. And even if they're trying to do the same thing that you're trying to do, you can operate from a more of a level of gratitude than resentment, that quiet resentment that we sometimes harbor when we feel like, I'm better than them, but they're getting more opportunities than I am. And we've all been there. And so I'm speaking from experience. But, what meditation has done for me is it allows me to just kind of pull that lens back a little bit more and just see that I'm right where I need to be at all times. So that's important. And then also nurturing fruitful, positive relationships. We are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And meditation will help you prune those friendships like nothing else, because you'll start to see how much insecurity and how much codependency there exists in humans in general. And, there's always people out there who are well-intentioned and trying to do the best they can. And sometimes, that it's the season for you to step in and become their mentor within the friendship. And sometimes it's the season for them to step in and become your mentor. And so it's not about, seeing yourself as better than anyone else when you meditate, but just recognizing that people come into your life at times that are most relevant for both parties, and people leave. And if they leave or if things change, it's not the end of the world. It just means that someone else is going to step in and provide some other type of experience for us that is going to benefit everyone in some meaningful way. And so you have less of that kind of FOMO attitude around relationships, because your internal guidance is always taking you in the direction of, meaningful connections and going deep instead of wide. And, and a part of that too is you may have less of a desire to engage in addictive behaviors and substance abuses that I think a lot of people rely upon to try to connect socially. And you may find that you don't go to bars as much, you don't drink as much, and that steers you towards, a painting class or some other, meetup group where you're connecting with people around more substantive activities where you guys are being more creative together, or you're exploring more interesting possibilities, and just let's see how much we can drink tonight and lose our consciousness and then wake up in the morning and brag about it. Like that after a while just is not as interesting.
How important are these elements, these that we talked about in terms of what a wellness lifestyle is? How important are those things in terms of attraction, and make it specific to you. So you're out, you see a gorgeous woman, or you're on your volleyball team, and one of your teammates brings a couple of her friends, and you're attracted to a woman.
Mm-hmm.
How important is it, as you get to know her, whether or not she is a person who works out, a person who eats really healthy foods, or a person who meditates or doesn't? Does that? I'm sure it comes up. I know it comes up. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, just to keep it real, look, I've never been married before. I don't have kids, but I am a heterosexual male, so I definitely love women and I date women. And what I found as I've gotten to be more mature is that instead of me trying to chase after someone and trying to convince them and force them to like what I like, what I found is that the people who are into me naturally are almost always open to, if they're not already in the lifestyle, they're open to exploring the lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's really, really hard because it's such a part of me now, this whole lifestyle, that if you're messing around with me, you're not going to be,
smoking cigarettes.
You're not going to be chain smoking cigarettes and going out drinking 2 bottles of wine at night. That's not
right.
Those are not the I'm that I attract. I usually attract. In fact, it's not even surprising anymore. I attract people and they go, "Oh yeah, I'm a vegan," or I've been meditating for 10 years or whatever. And we may not be doing the same type of meditation or the same type of diet, but there's some mindfulness or thoughtfulness that goes into their lifestyle. So I've kind of had that experience so many times that I don't even really question it anymore. And it also is a good filter for me, because if I express interest in someone and there's no reciprocity, then I just already know that, okay, vibrationally, this is not a match. No matter what it looks like on the surface, no matter what it looks like on paper, she could be the most beautiful or the most interesting person or what have you. But if there's no resonance, then, there's something going on. And then later on, I'll find out, oh yeah, I was going through this really dark time, or I was involved with someone else who was, I couldn't get out of that situation. There was always an explanation later on. So I just come to trust that and trust in my inner guidance. And, I've had so many experiences in my life at this point where I listened to my inner guidance and I've never been led astray, that now I just don't even question it anymore. I mean, I still question it sometimes, but I'm pretty good at just, even if I'm questioning it, to just follow through with it and kind of allow it to guide me. And I don't mean that people can hear that and take that in a way where it says, well, you just don't, you lay around and just let stuff happen. No, I'm the hardest worker that I know, actually. And I consider it my job to do the best that I can to prepare myself. So I'm working out, I'm making sure I'm the most attractive potential partner that I can be. I'm working out, I'm eating well, I'm taking care of myself, I'm meditating, I'm, making sure that I'm abundant and all of these things. So if I'm doing everything I can and it's not working out, then it's just not meant to be.
Right.
I'm definitely not laying around waiting for something to happen.
Mm-hmm. On the book, what's funny about the book is I don't feel like I wrote the book by any stretch, but I was definitely there every day of the process. Actually, with both books. So the Inner Gym was self-published. You could do whatever you want. And I know your mission for Bliss More, as you said earlier, was to give an entry point for people who necessarily wouldn't come and do the full experience, to still have access to a technique and see value in meditation. Mm-hmm. How did you experience that, going from having the complete autonomy over the Inner Gym versus the compromise you may have had to make, or compromises you may have had to make, in sharing a voice with the publisher? And how'd that work out? And how do you feel about it now that the project is done?
Well, I think it's the opposite of what people would think, or what I initially thought when I first started writing my self-published book, The Inner Gym. It took me 3.5 years to write the Inner Gem. And it took me 6 months
to write the Inner Gem. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. I didn't say that. I said
I
3.5 years. And it took me 6 months to write Bliss More. Now, when I was writing Bliss More, I really wasn't doing much of anything else. I was just writing. And the part of that was because I got an advance from the publisher. So I was able to not work as much, and I could just spend a lot of time writing. And I also had, an editor, an independent editor that I was working with, and I had an agent who was kind of shepherding us through the entire process. I didn't have that in the beginning with the first book. And so while I had autonomy in the first book, I didn't have the deadlines that I think are actually necessary for getting the process complete. And while I had the deadlines in the second book, I wish I had more. I wish I had more time to kind of flesh out the concepts and because the thing with writing is like art. You can't really paint. If someone said, "I want you to paint a masterpiece," you have till Friday to do it. Mm-hmm. That's not really how painting works. You have inspiration, you have technique, obviously, but you can't force the concept. You can't force the inspiration. And I felt like with Bliss More, it was a bit forced from my end, and I felt like it could have been a better product if I had more time to write. But also knowing me and knowing if I was left up to my own devices, I still would have probably waited and procrastinated a bit.
Yeah.
And called it. I was just being inspired and all this kind of stuff. And so I think it works out, and having the benefit of having a couple of editors look at the stuff and also the fact that they didn't know anything about anything. They didn't know anything about meditation. So right. It was kind of nice. At first I thought, well, I want to get someone to work with me who knows about meditation. But then I saw the value in working with someone who didn't know anything about it, because I figured if I could write in a way that they get it, then the average person who's out there reading the book is going to be able to get it a lot easier. So I think that ended up working out. And the feedback has been amazing from Bliss More. And, the feedback from Inner Gem was great too.
Before you go into feedback, I'm gonna pick your brain and make you give your own counter argument.
Okay.
You went to an art class. This is the benefit I have of the duration of our friendship. I've known you for longer than I haven't known you. You've known me longer than you have in terms of your lifespan. Mm-hmm. You went to an art class. In the art class, they told you to...
The one at NYU?
The one at NYU. Tell the story. Tell the story and then listen to the story yourself.
So I went to the art class. It was a live nude drawing class. And the first day the teacher said, okay, the figure model is going to pose, and you guys, you have 1 minute to draw whatever you're going to draw. Mm-hmm. So of course everyone's thinking, that's not enough time. So you're literally just scribbling out chicken scratch drawings.
Right.
And we did that a couple times. They changed positions. You had another minute, change positions. Now you had 5 minutes. All of a sudden, you're looking like Michelangelo with your 5 minutes. Because you got 4 extra minutes. And then after that, he said, okay, now you got 30 minutes. And then it was like, he said, you have all the time in the world to draw. So it was kind of cool, because the pressure of having to do it so quickly, it changed your relationship with time, and it forced you to have to it allowed you to be able to maximize the time that you had. Because if he had started with 30 minutes, we would have thought, oh, it's not enough time. Mm-hmm. 30 minutes is not nearly enough time to get this thing done. So it was just kind of distorting the point of reference.
Right. And there's Bliss More. And that's why they pay me to coach. Boom. You just did the complete opposite argument of what you just made. But I think that...
Well, here's the difference, though. Just to my own credit, like, I knew that those drawings, if I didn't want them to never see the light of day, then they weren't going to. But in my mind, I'm thinking this thing is going to live forever. You know, people may be referencing this thing 800 years from now, 1,000 years from now, 3,000 years from now. We don't know where this thing is going to go. So I want to make sure that it communicates what I want it to communicate, because once this thing goes out, I'm never going to be able to influence it again. And it has my name on it.
Well,
So,
that's not true.
which means it has my whole family heritage's, reputation.
You have the tendency to
on
Axl Rose stuff. You have a tendency to put, this is the album, and then when it's album number 2 time, I need it to be perfect. And you're a perfect instead of progress guy, which we have to continue working on. And that's the deal. I get it. True. You're right. But your voice is the most influential voice in your head. And I think that you have what you said about Bliss More in that process, but you also have what you just experienced in the art class. And that was 15, 20 years ago also. But it's there. And if you think about the lesson that you got in that, I think it may help you to navigate the process for book 3, which we want to do. In terms of feedback, I know you got a lot of great feedback. I know you did the 21-day challenge. You're doing it again. I've seen the reposts. I've seen a lot of people who I consider your super fans rising to support you. I've seen people who never heard of you before support you. And I just want to know what surprised you. Pick something in the total spectrum of feedback you got and tell me something that genuinely surprised you so far.
What surprised me was that what surprised me about the process?
No, not about the process, about some feedback.
Feedback.
Yeah.
Well, look, we did the 21-day challenge, and the Inner Gym was a 30-day challenge. And that was great. People loved it. And so I kind of already had a template in mind for the Bliss More challenge. And one of the things that I like to incorporate in this challenge is social media in some aspect. I think accountability is important. But I also like to have fun. I think a lot of people make meditation very serious. And I wanted to not only demystify the practice, but I wanted to show that there's a lightness to it. And I think that when people are able to embody the lightness of meditation, it allows them to relax a little bit more, and they get better results because they're more relaxed in the process. So I used a lot of memes. I use a lot of GIFs on the challenge pages, just to kind of show the lightness of what we were learning and doing. And then we used Instagram for accountability. So we'd have people go and post on Instagram and tag Bliss More Challenge every day to be accountable. And I think that ended up, I wasn't sure how that was going to go, because I think the go-to is, let's do a Facebook group. People go to the Facebook group, blah, blah, blah. But I think more people are spending time on Instagram these days. Mm-hmm. And so it ended up being a good call. Because I felt that people were really excited about sharing their journey on Instagram with their friends, who could then cheer them on and that kind of thing. And also, you could easily scroll through everyone else's pictures and see. Whereas with a Facebook page, you scroll through the group wall, and it's half of it is like people saying the same stuff, or people debating about stuff that doesn't really matter. And so it's just, you get right to the images that people really love. And on each day of the challenge, I could also post the feed from Instagram, so people could see in real time while they were reading the page what the people who were living across the world had already posted, who got the message, who got the email, before they did. So that was kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And the thing that surprised me is that after the 21 days were over, there was this kind of organic movement to continue on. And then this new hashtag kind of rose from that, which was Bliss More for 90 more days. Mm-hmm. Or Bliss More for 90 days or something like that. And
which you didn't set up.
I didn't set it up, no.
Right.
But there's like a group of people who are doing it for now. Because in the book, I talk about, in order to form the habit properly, you have to do it for 90 days. But there's no way I was going to do a 90-day challenge, because, you get the drop-off rate would be, it would be, enormous. And that's, going back to what we talked about earlier, this whole thing with paying for stuff and meditation should be free. Here, we did a Bliss More challenge, 21 days, free challenge. The book was whatever, $15 or whatever it was on Amazon, $12 on Kindle. If it's true that having the free offering, was the answer, then everybody who bought into that and who started the challenge would have finished the challenge. But you see, you get the normal drop-off rate. 30% of the people who started stop doing it.
Right.
Now we don't know why they stopped doing it, but I guarantee you, if they paid me $1,000 to do this challenge, they'd all be doing it still. Mm-hmm. They'd be getting their money's worth out of it. And if they did it and if they completed it, they would be in a better situation and they would get the benefits of the meditation. But because it was free, it's so easy not to commit to it.
Right.
And I think we understand that when it comes to buying handbags and cars and, organic food versus conventionally grown food. But for some reason, we get this selective amnesia when it comes to things like meditation. And I think it's because we still see it, especially in the African-American community. We've talked about this, you and I. We see it as a luxury item. It's not a necessity. Meditation is not a necessity yet in our community. And so hopefully we get to that point where we start to value it as much as the more privileged communities value these kinds of wellness practices. Because a lot of people in the Black communities, they won't spend the extra 50 cents for organic food or go to the farmer's market because it's just easier and quicker to go to the bodega or
sure.
Right. Yeah, you're running down there. Or my mother used to say all the time, when I was a vegan, I'd say, why are you using Crisco, which is basically lard, to make the pie or whatever you're making? And why don't you use, there's a coconut oil or whatever you can use, and that's healthier. She didn't want to hear that. She wasn't interested in what was healthier. Her mother always cooked with Crisco, and
right,
that's what she cooked with.
Right.
So, and the fact that the coconut oil would have been 3 times as more expensive than the Crisco, I mean, there's no way I'm doing it.
Right.
If that's the case, even if I was open to it, there's no way I'm doing it. Yep. So I think that, again, it's a self-selecting process, the whole investment. I even do a chapter on it in the book called The Exchange Principle, just kind of saying how important it is to make some sort of exchange. And I meet people all the time. They don't have, they want to learn with me. They don't have money. I say, well, look, go and volunteer somewhere. Go volunteer at an organization for 30 hours, come back, show me the certificate that you volunteered, and then I'll train you to meditate. I've done that before. I don't do that as much. It's a case-by-case basis. So
right.
If you're listening to this, don't come to me saying, oh, I was a lifeguard when I was 15 years old. Does that count? Right. It's like, no, from the moment we meet, then you have to go and do something. Because again, your time is there's a value to that. And so I get people saying, no, I don't want to do that because that's too much, right? So what they're saying is that they're acknowledging there's a value. Yeah, their time is worth more than mine. Exactly. And that's all I need to hear for me to make my decision. You're not ready to learn with me.
Right.
So when you're ready to learn, making that exchange is going to be an obvious thing that needs to happen in order for you to be invested, and so that you're not shortchanging yourself. Because it's not about shortchanging me. Like I'm not making my operation is not going to be made or broken by
one guy.
Yeah. One guy, 1 or 2 or 3, whatever. It's like if you're trying to get over on people and make a ton of money, you're not going to become a meditation teacher. There's much easier ways to get wealthy than teaching people how to meditate. If you're just driven by wanting to accumulate as much money as possible, I'm trying to help people. And I know the mechanics, and you know them as well. We've talked about it many times, and we both have kind of laughed at each other's experiences with clients where people aren't invested and they want you to basically pay them to transform them. And it just doesn't work that way, and we talk about, having to, we both have gone above and beyond to help people, and we have to pull each other down off the ledge and say, look, man, you just got to let them,
right.
You just got to let them figure it out, because you don't have time to be jumping through hoops you're taking away from everybody else who is vested in their transformation, and let that person just have their own experience, do the research on what it's like to keep suffering or keep, gaining weight or whatever the case may be. And eventually everybody always comes back around. And when I have people who fly to see me from across the country or even from across the world, it just reminds me of the value of what I'm doing. And it just makes it a lot easier to allow other people to have their experience. And there's plenty of people to go and they'll give you a meditation experience for hardly anything. You can go to the forest for 10 days and that's free, and you can do all that. So there are free options. So I don't feel bad charging people to teach them to meditate, because there are plenty of options. I happen to be what I would consider a premium option. And for people who want that level of experience, they come and find me. If they don't, then that's fine.
Yep.
I'm a professional, and I'm very clear about that.
There it is. Hey, man, Bliss More is the book. I'm so happy that's done and it's out. I was happy to be able to make it to the launch in LA. How to Succeed in Meditation Without Really Trying. I do have one last question on the book. You reference Alfonso, 30-something-year-old guy in IT. Is that our Alfonso?
That's our Alfonso. That you connected me with him, and I taught him meditation in DC many years ago, and he's been doing it like clockwork. And now he's a big entrepreneur. He's got a tea company, Brooklyn Tea, which it's not unusual. And that's what I love about what I do, because I'm in touch with these guys after I teach them. I can see the trajectory, and
right.
I can see how, I hear it all the time. I mean, yeah, there are the health benefits to meditation, but then you also hear people doing amazing things. Like the guy who, the High Line in New York.
Yeah.
The park, the elevated park on the old train tracks.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who created that, he's a meditator.
Right.
He started meditating. He didn't come up with the idea from meditation, but he came up with the idea, and then he started meditating. And just like my friend who was able to get off the sodas, he kept following through on this idea of creating this elevated park. And then eventually 10 years later, it became the High Line. And he attributes meditation to giving him the energy and the stamina and the focus to be able to follow through on that.
Right.
And, there's a guy named Jesse Israel in New York who created the Big Quiet, which are these mass meditation experiences. I taught him how to meditate. And after that, he quit his job in the music industry, and he started doing these other experiences. They started growing, and now he's one of the biggest, most influential people in the meditation scene in the country. And I see it all the time. I tell people, if you don't want to be happy, don't start meditating every day, because that's what's going to happen. And then once you get happy, once you fill the hole inside, I mean, it's no limit to what you can do, because you're not doing things solely to make money anymore. You're doing things to help people. And when you're doing things with that intention in mind, the universe just supports you, and you end up being able to just achieve the most amazing things that you probably never even imagined that you could achieve back when you were living life under the influence of stress, where you were just kind of trying to get to the next moment. Even though you probably were making a lot of money, you were just trying to get to sleep that night, or you're just trying to get to the next meeting and just trying to do enough to get by, because that's what stress does. Is it hampers our potential, and it makes us get into that just get by mode, where we never feel like we have enough of anything, enough sex, enough food, enough time, enough
attention,
enough exercise,
right.
enough attention, anything. Yeah. So we have to keep filling the hole, the endless hole inside, and we never get a chance to really give back in the way that we all want to. So if you don't want to be fulfilled and don't want to be happy, then don't start meditating, because that's exactly what's going to happen.
Thank you, man. We got it.
Absolutely. Perfect.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
This conversation was a long time coming.
The Super Fantastic Show.